This is Geometer. It's an app for 8th graders to learn about geometry. And this is the landing page or create account / login page where users get a brief rundown of what the app is about. So I'm gonna go ahead and log in. Okay, so as you can see, we're initially prompted with this landing page of the dashboard, which gives a rundown of each of the lessons. Right now, there are some lessons locked because we did the previous lessons. And each lesson will have a title as well as a brief description of what the lesson is about. So let's do the right triangles, where we'll learn about the Pythagorean theorem and the perimeter and area of right triangles. Okay, so at the beginning of each lesson, this assistant called Geometer will give a brief rundown of what the lesson's about and will guide you along the way. So right now, it's telling us that basically it'll start with doing an example, because examples help the users to understand how to do it without having to do too much of work in a topic that they're not very familiar with. So we'll start by just going through the steps. Each step will identify a different step for doing the Pythagorean theorem. So in this case, we're identifying the legs, and then the hypotenuse, which is opposite the right angle, obviously. And then it'll also give a formula, very important so that they can solve problems in the future. And then it'll finally solve a problem and reveal the answer. Now, Geometer will make the student do a guided version of the problem. So in this case, it'll first ask the user to do the first step by identifying the legs. So I'll just put in the legs. Then it'll ask them to solve for c squared. That's the next step of the problem. I'm gonna get this one wrong. As you can see, there are hints that prompt the user while not revealing the problem entirely. I made sure to make it like that. Finally, solving for the square root. Now the rest of the lesson will be mostly focused on the user doing the problems by themselves with minimal guidance. So in this case, the user will just solve for the hypotenuse. The formula is given for the first few questions. And also there are some review of previous topics, because since these are 8th graders, they may have some background knowledge about how to find the area of a triangle, but I gave them a little refresher over here just in case they may have forgotten. So, and also added some multi-step problems. So the first step for this will be finding the leg, and then it'll be finding the perimeter. I wanted to make it a little interactive, so I allowed them to kind of unwrap this triangle and make it a straight line, so they can simply add up the little side lengths. Another multi-step problem to find the area, combining multiple concepts to solve a complex problem. I also wanted to make the problems sort of build upon each other, so this next lesson will have some concepts from the previous lesson, specifically the Pythagorean theorem. I'll start the lesson. Okay, brief rundown from Geometer. So basically this one will be focusing on non-right triangles, specifically the area of them. As you can see, it's a little interactive here for them to understand the area of right triangles. The non-right triangles. It'll give them information on how to find the area and identify different parts of the triangle. So the base is 4, the height is 3, and then it'll give the formula, and also it'll solve the formula so they can understand how to do it in actual problems. Also, I added a little sort of proof for them to understand it a bit more conceptually. So by using past information about parallelograms, because students tend to learn about the parallelogram in 6th grade, so these 8th graders definitely have some background knowledge on this. We'll use this past formula for them to understand how and why the area of a non-right triangle is based on sides divided by 2. So as you can see, we'll go through the steps and divide it by 2 because it's a parallelogram split into 2. So by adding this, it's just a little bit more interactive and kind of explains why the things are, rather than just having them memorize every single little step and formula. Give an explanation. Okay, now we'll do a guided version of a problem. So first they're asked to identify the base and the height. They may get it wrong, like flip them around, so we'll give a prompting based on that. And then the area, simple. And now I'll start off with a simple problem, just plugging in the numbers. But then I wanted to make it a bit more advanced, so I added concepts from the past lesson, here the Pythagorean theorem. So the area will be, this side length is 10, this side length is 17. So 17 plus 21 plus 10 is 48. Also added a little interactive here for them to solve an isosceles triangle in a unique way. So look at this triangle and that triangle, that the area's up. So 24 plus 24 is 48. And then finally this triangle, this is a bit more complex. They first have to find this side length, which is 30. 128 divided by 8 times 2 is 30. And then split that into half, that's 15, 8, 17. So 17, 17, 15, 64. I wanted to make the problems a bit more complex and not give them steps to do them so they can have more problem solving skills. Rather than being kind of handheld all the time, they need to be able to use the different formulas they know to solve these complex problems. So, yeah. And besides that, they have a progress bar here in the dashboard for them to understand where they are in the courses, and also the account page, just some basic information, and log out, reset progress, delete account, simple stuff like that. And yeah, that's about it.